welcome back to the channel. I'm sat here today with journalist and author, veteran of the beauty industry, Alice Hart-Davis, and we're just going to be having a chit chat about her life, and I'm going to be asking some probing questions and seeing what I can get out of you.
Sounds worrying.
Okay, so why don't we just set the scene a little bit and tell us a little bit about where you grew up.
Right, I grew up in the countryside in Oxfordshire on a farm.
I pitched you as that, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, running around in gumboots with long hair in plaits to keep it out of all the hay and grass and stuff out of it. I used to wash my hair once every 3 weeks, and it was a real horror, worst night of the 3 week period or whatever it was. But yeah.
Do you advocate that now, by the way?
No, I don't actually. I can say, I know we're going to talk about hair and things in due course, and sometimes I wash my hair every day, sometimes I leave it quite a bit. I know the arguments either way for what's good for one thing or another, but what suits me more is to wash it more often.
Me too.
So that's definitely what I do now. But way back when, yeah, running around with more, with other things to be concerned about than hair washing. Also, there were no conditioners back then. This was like early 70s.
I didn't know that.
So, well, maybe there were, but maybe my mum just hadn't found her way to them. But when this product launched called Johnson's No More Tangles, No More Tears, it was like a squirt-in conditioner detangling spray. It changed my life. Because if your hair's down to here, and it's thick, and it's full of knots, and it's just being washed, and it's all stripped out by foaming shampoos, and you have to have it combed through without conditioner, it's a nightmare. So with that stuff, it's good.
Do you think that sparked your interest in beauty?
No. I didn't get into beauty writing for ages. As a journalist, I wrote about shopping first, general features, cars, all sorts of stuff, and then I ended up writing about health. And the woman who sat opposite me at work, this was by then at the Evening Standard, she picked up all the beauty stuff that came in. I mean, it was a newspaper, and newspapers didn't cover beauty back in the late 90s because it was a magazine thing. You know, there just wasn't coverage. But the PRs would send stuff in that would land on her desk, and I thought it looked like rather a fun thing. She got all these parcels with ribbons and bows, and if she did ever write about them, they sent her flowers. It looked very nice. Whereas writing about health, that was fab, useful stuff, but it's a bit of a heart sink, you know. It's all ingrown toenails and bad backs, and you've got to be very serious. So when my colleague left, because she was freelance and she wasn't replaced, and I just said, I'll adopt her post bag, I'll look after all that. And so when any opportunity came up to write about beauty stories, I was there, I could do it. And once I started doing it for all the wrong reasons, because it looked fluffy and pretty and attractive, but as soon as you get into that kind of thing, you discover this whole world of anti-aging lotions and hair removal procedures, and then from there you go further in and find this whole industry which has provided me with a sort of full spectrum career since then. So after uni, I came up to London to work because, I mean, all of my friends, we all wanted to come and work in London, and I didn't back myself to get into the city because I have very limited grasp of numbers. But I wanted to go into advertising, but until I went through the sort of the interviews, and then thought actually maybe that wasn't so much fun. I mean, I hadn't a clue, basically, like many people. But I wrote to a lot of magazines asking for a summer job in my second year. And I went and did 2 weeks at Vogue, which was great, being like an intern. So I hadn't a clue what I was doing there either, because it was all very confusing. And they were all wafting around in clothes I thought would have been like, people used to come into work in things that looked more like ball gowns.
So what would you say sparked your specific interest in beauty? It was just the constant exposure?
Well, like anybody, I love the whole beauty sort of thing, putting on makeup, doing hair. Most women enjoy that kind of thing. So when the chance came along to write about it, and when I was on Vogue, obviously there's a whole beauty department there, which was an absolute Aladdin's cave, but because I wasn't on a magazine, I hadn't thought there could be a way to write about it because there was no coverage of beauty in the newspapers at that time, 80s, 90s. But when it began to change, then I think, well, this is an awful lot more fun than writing about bad backs and ingrown toenails. So even though those sound the most awful, lightweight reasons for writing about it, but really beauty is all about self-care and what that contributes to your feelings of self-worth and self-esteem. So I would defend it quite strongly now, even though so many people regard it as a very flippant sort of thing, don't they? A flippant pursuit, beauty, or an indulgence. And yet it's hard to sort of sweep it away when it's an industry that contributes some estimated 17 billion to the national economy every year. You know, it's a lot. It's big business. People buy this stuff. So getting to write about it and getting to see all the different sides of the industry, whether it's the manufacturing side or the aesthetics side or the hairdressing side, spa, you know, it all goes quite wide, all of this. Look what you've got there, well-thumbed copies.
You wrote a couple of books.
I did with my daughters when they were teenagers. Now, this is the first one, Be Beautiful, which is just all the questions that a 12-year-old will come up with about her looks. You know, can she shave her legs? Should she cleanse her face? And if so, how? And what does cleansing mean? Is it the same as washing? So it's all really good entry-level stuff, which I find actually really interesting to write as well, because when you're talking to grown-ups about beauty, you assume a certain amount of knowledge. You know, if you say cleanse, they'll know what you mean. If you say that to a 12-year-old, they will ask you what on earth you mean, cleansing as opposed to washing. Basics of makeup, we went down to Selfridges for this, just fab. We got in early before they opened, and they all went quite berserk on the MAC counter. I think that was the big draw. Yeah, here they all are, all grown-up young ladies, all spots, hideous spots.
It's very fun.
How to do foundation. It's quite lively, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the idea is it's like a sort of big sister just telling you straightforward, unscary things.
And this was your second one.
And this one we did a couple of years later, which went a bit wider than that first one. So we took this more out into wellness, self-esteem, bit of clothing. Uchenna, yes. I've been pals with Uchenna for a long time. And who else? We've got all these experts popping in every now and again to talk about.
Who's the hair person? Matthew Alexander.
Yes, lovely Matthew Alexander, who kindly had the girls in the salon and just transformed them. They came back looking like complete grown-up young ladies. Oh, Louise Constad, my makeup supremo friend, who did all these. That's why the next page looks. From the first book, what we found was that everybody just wanted more makeup, more eyeliner, more ways to play. Because at that age, it is all about play, isn't it? It's experimentation, seeing what suits you. And, you know, it's only makeup. So if you put it on and it's not great, you can just take it off. Sam Bunty, quick check on the Skin Guru. Yeah.
Been around a long time. I know as part of your job, you test a lot of procedures.
I do. Well, these things, when I started writing about beauty, it was just when all these things were starting up as well. And Botox was kind of whispered about in corners. This was 99, 2000, you know. So doctors were doing it in London, but it wasn't talked about, it wasn't really acknowledged, and it was all very hush-hush. So when the chance came up to try some of these new things, also I was coming up for 40 then, and you know, and with 3 small children, you know, I looked exhausted. And a friend of mine used to do Botox, I remember, and she said it was fantastic for her. She was 5 years older. It made so much difference. I thought, ooh, would I, wouldn't I? And then there comes a point where because all the normal arguments that people deploy saying, it's poison, how could you, would you freeze your face? We know all those things are gross simplifications, but that's how people talked about it, certainly 20 years ago. And when there comes a point, you know, you look in the mirror and you just think, this is not how I feel, or this is not how I want to look, or people start telling you you look cross the whole time when you're not. So this is a long-winded way of getting around to saying I had the opportunity to try these things. People wanted them written about in the papers, and it was fascinating. And then I started to find my way around the world of aesthetics, meet the doctors, the surgeons who were trying all these things. I remember when Botox was approved by the FDA as a cosmetic treatment, which was 2002, I was very confused because I hadn't fully appreciated, because everyone in London was using it freely anyway. I couldn't think what difference it was going to make. I hadn't appreciated it. It was all very off-label, all the uses of it then. So yeah, since then I have tried most things one way or another, and I have written a book about all that now, which is coming out very soon. It's called The Tweakments Guide, and it's everything you want to know about Botox, fillers, lasers, peels, and all the rest by the woman who's tried them all. I've tried most of the things in the book, but not all of them.
So what do you think's changed since you started?
It's attitude as much as anything. It's that very gentle drip of lessening of stigma over the years, but there's been a sudden rush of it in the last 2 or 3 years. Would you say that's fair? Because in the noughties, it was all still everyone's very hands off. People didn't want to admit they were doing these things. I've written openly about them in the national press since I started doing these things, so I would always get a lot of stick for that. People would say, how could you mutilate yourself? Why do you hate yourself so much as to do these things? You think, I'm just curious and I'm just vain and I have the opportunities. So really it's not that serious. Also, these things are serious. They are medical procedures. They are minor cosmetic medical procedures, but the more you hang around in those areas, the more you do them. I mean, you know what it's like. It doesn't have to be a big stress of I'm going to do this thing and it's going to be terrifying. You just go along, see these doctors who by then may be your friends, and try whatever their latest thing is. If it's got reasonable science behind it, if you trust them as well as the product, then it's not so bad. And these things tend to be temporary as well, so they will make a difference, but if it's not a great difference, it will at least go away. Because I've had some things which you afterwards I think I'm such a fool and I'm never doing that again.
Okay, this is interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So
what did you not rate?
Back in 2003 there was a procedure called isologen, which was it was the grow your own facelift, seriously, which they would take a snippet of skin from behind the ear and freeze that, whiz it off to the lab, clone the fibroblasts. These are the cells that produce the collagen in the skin, into millions, and then spin them down into a concentrated serum of fibroblasts, which they would, and this is the point, then they would freeze it, keep it cryogenically on hold until your aging face needed it. Or you could have it just re-injected straight away to boost it. And they showed us brilliant pictures of how well it worked on burns victims, how it regrew the skin, how it could really regenerate. So you think, wow, let's do this. And the idea also was that if you had this done when you were younger, you could keep those cells, whether they were your 25-year-old cells, your 45-year-old cells, on ice for the future. But it involved an awful lot of needling to get it back into the skin, 250 injections or something all over. So I hadn't told my husband about this, and I came home looking like I'd been stung by a swarm of bees, and he was working from home at the time. He was really angry, and said, how do you know this isn't going to do something awful? And you think, well, I don't, but in that case, it was a really expensive procedure as well. If you were paying for it, £3,000, which would be equivalent to about 5,000 now, I suppose, or something. And it didn't really do anything.
I was just going to ask that.
Yeah, there was a lot of debate, and the people behind the brand said the doctors were injecting it too superficially or too deeply, and that there was a misunderstanding about it. And then it all started to go wrong, and the shareholders rebelled in the States, and it had one round go of refinancing itself, and then it collapsed. And it vanished in a puff of smoke, taking all of our cryogenically frozen fibroblasts with it.
No.
Yeah, they were out at a facility at Park Royal, and I don't know what I don't know what happened. They're probably being genetically engineered somewhere on the deep dark web. But so that was, I mean, that was just, it seemed like such a brilliant idea, but it was an awful lot to suggest that people went and tried something like that, and then it didn't work. But more recently, Iovera, which is billed as an alternative to Botox, it kills a portion of the nerve wherever it's used in knee pain and things, which is fine. But the brilliant idea to use it in the face, I just thought it sounded really interesting and unusual, and I wanted to write a story about it. And I kept pestering the poor surgeon who was fronting it in the UK to do a story. He wouldn't let me do it until he'd done his trial group, you know, all full marks to him for that. And it was extraordinary. It involved a device like a little trident with 3 6mm needles, which they dug into the side of your head. Have you seen this done? Yeah, okay. Over the path of the nerve that is managing your face muscles. And then they pass liquid nitrogen, very, very, very cold, not into your face but through the metal of the needles to super cool it and kill the portion of that nerve. Whereupon your face just collapses like this because it can't live. What I hadn't realised was that it could work on one side, it worked on this side, and not on the other, because the nerve comes up in 2 branches. So I had the maximum number of treatments on this side and no reaction, and this one came down like that. And I always try to write as I find. So, you know, I like this surgeon, but there was no way I could claim it had been a good or successful treatment. Yes. And somebody was videoing the whole process, and in between each shot I would sit up and lift my eyebrows, and you know, there's one that's going boing like normal and the other is absolutely down. I couldn't get my contact lens in without lifting up my eyelid. Oh God. And I saw another surgeon, he's a friend, at a conference the next week, and said, "Hey, look what I've done now." And he wasn't at all amused, and he said, "You're an idiot, that is permanent nerve damage, you've really done it now." And I went very crushed, and I said, "It'll regrow." And he said, "You know that how?" I said, "Because it says so in their marketing materials." And he was like, "You know, I give up on you." And anyway, it did regrow, and 3 months later there was a tiny twitch, and oh, hallelujah. But I think that was very stupid of me.
Wow.
So I do slightly worry that one day I'm going to try something that will leave me looking like the wind changed while I was trying on a Snapchat filter, and in which case I'll have to walk around with a paper bag on my head for the rest of my life. But too bad, because I'm not actually that vain, contrary to all the you think, because this is the way I make my living, and because I obviously sit here and put on lots of makeup, but you know, my dog will still love me however I look. If I'm lucky, my husband will too.
Okay guys, so that's it for this week. Thank you so much for agreeing to have me in your home. Don't forget to go over to Alice's YouTube channel because she's going to be showing some of the crazy procedures that she has done on a regular basis. And also I'm going to just pop a link to her new book as well. It's thetweakmentsguide.com, and you can see her having some of these tweakments over on the channel as well, which might be of interest. You are very welcome.
And they won't all be mad, some of them will be good sensible ones as well.
So I will see you guys again next week. See you later.
Bye.